Please stay tuned.
Thank you for joining us again on the resumption of the screening of ministerial nominees by the Senate. Well, the Senate just reconvened after its break, and then the next nominee is coming in now for screening. Otumba Richard Adeniyi Adebayo. He was born in Lagos on the 4th of February 1958. Richard Adebayo attended CMS Grammar School, Bariga, Lagos. He had his School of Basic Studies, attended School of Basic Studies, Kwara State, between 1974 and 1975. He attended University of Lagos between 1968 and 1969. He is the first civilian governor of Ekiti State between 1999 to 2003 and the Deputy National Chairman South of the All Progressives Congress. He has now mounted the podium for screening.
Order. Colleagues, distinguished colleagues, this afternoon we are starting our screening exercise with His Excellency Otumba Richard Adeniyi Adebayo, CON, the nominee for Ekiti State. On behalf of my very distinguished colleagues, I want to welcome you, Your Excellency, to the Senate chambers. We already have copies of your CV, and if there are details in the CV that you want to highlight and emphasize, you can do so. And indeed, if you have anything outside of the CV but you think that is important that this Senate knows, you may highlight those issues. Once again, you are welcome to the Senate chambers, and you can address the Senate now.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, Your Excellency, the Deputy President of the Senate, Principal Officers of the Senate, distinguished senators, may I crave your indulgence to specifically acknowledge the three senators from Ekiti State: Senator Bumi Adetumbi, Senator Dayo Adeyeye, and Senator Okoyemi Bamidele. They have been very courteous and have guided me in my appearance here today. And for that, I want to say a very big thank you to them. What occurred during, I'd like to assure this infrastructure to abuse the process so that we could detect commodity policing. My privilege of serving the public service, the youth of Nigeria want only one thing, which is jobs. The youth want jobs. The youth want jobs. So it falls on us at the Executive Council to initiate policies that will translate into multiple jobs for our teeming youth. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, you would have noticed that I allowed for more questions to be asked. The essence is to give opportunity to the nominees themselves These are people who have been nominated, and of course, they have shown competence. And the educators and Nigerians who are watching or listening to this. So it's not to prolong our stay here. With these brief remarks, I will now put the question. Those in favor of the motion that the nominee takes a bow and go, having exhausted or responded to all the questions, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You can take a bow.
Well, that was the last nominee that have just been screened from Nasarawa State, Mohammed Abdullahi. The senators did ask him some questions, especially on the issue of incompletion of contracts, especially road contracts. And then the nominee was able to explain some of the certain steps that, if confirmed as minister and then drafted into the Ministry of Works, has listed some steps he would take to ensure that these are all addressed. For instance, he talked about revoking of some of those contracts, and he also advised public servants to ensure that whenever there is need for contractual agreement between contractors and government, that there should be, that the terms of the contract must be vividly clear and written. And then another nominee is coming in now to face the Senate. The next nominee that's going to mount the podium now is Sunday Akindare. Sunday Akindare is from Oyo State.
Mr. Akindare, you are welcome to the Senate chambers. On behalf of all my colleagues here, we welcome you.
Thank you.
We are in receipt of your CV and all the details, but you can still highlight on those that you feel are so important for this exercise. And in fact, you could also add if there is anything missing or left out, but you feel is important for this exercise. Well, once again, you are welcome and you can address the Senate.
Thank you. Distinguished Senate President, Senator Ahmed Lawal, the distinguished Deputy Senate President, Senator Omagege, most distinguished senators in this hallowed chamber this afternoon, and indeed, my distinguished senators from the state of Oyo Agbewao, let me start by putting forward my appreciation for this opportunity to stand before this very important assembly, the Nigerian Senate, the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let me also equally, with all modesty, thank the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, for counting me worthy to be a ministerial nominee in a country of 193 million with talented people. I thank you for this opportunity. And once again, my names are Sunday Akin Dare from Ogbomoso, Oyo State. In 2016, I had the privilege and opportunity to be screened by a committee from this Senate for the position of the Executive Commissioner Stakeholder Management of Nigerian Communications Commission. And 2.5 years down the road, I've had the great opportunity and privilege to serve this country in that capacity of managing the telecommunications sector of our economy, a sector that has been very dynamic in growing our GDP from 9.1 when I joined to 10.1 as we speak. I've had the opportunity to help work with different critical stakeholders to make sure that telecommunications serves as a tool for national development, particularly in the era of digitization. So today, I stand before you I finished from the Baptist High School in Jos. I proceeded from there to the Oyo State College of Arts and Science, Oscars Ile-Ife, for my advanced level studies in geography, government, and history. Thereafter, I proceeded to the Ahmadu Bello University Zaria to read international studies. Thereafter, I proceeded to the University of Jos, where I earned a master's degree in international law and diplomacy. Still on the academics, I had the opportunity of being selected as a visiting journalism scholar to the New York University, NYU, in New York. And then in the year 2000, I was selected as a Nieman Fellow at the Harvard University for a one-year academic study. And finally, in 2010, 2011, I won another fellowship award to conduct academic research in residence at the Oxford University in the United Kingdom. At the professional level, I've had a stint for almost 25 years as a journalist and a writer. I worked with the News magazine and Tempo, after which I moved on to work at the Voice of America in Washington, D.C., where I served for 9 years as the chief or director of the Hausa service of the Voice of America, where we broadcast to about 45 million Hausa speakers across the West African sub-region. If you permit me, I want to step back and talk a bit about my work as a journalist, particularly with the News and Tempo magazine, where I rose to become the general editor. It was a period in which constitutional democracy was suspended in this country. It was a period in which the parliament, as important as it is, fulcrum of democracy, where you now sit, was also suspended. And I, along with members of the civil society, played a critical role in fighting for the return of civil democracy and constitutional rule to Nigeria. At the risk of our lives, our limbs, and I'm sure there are some members, distinguished members of this hallowed chamber today, who are part of either NADECO, the civil society, or the pro-democracy group that joined to make sure that we enjoyed the fruit of democracy as it is today. I will move quickly to just speak briefly about my work at the NCC. We live in an era of digitization in which every aspect of our lives is now being digitalized. We leverage on critical telecommunications infrastructure and technology under IT, as we call it in the industry, ICT when it comes to education. We have e-commerce, e-medicine, and the NCC, as the regulator, plays a key role in making sure that national development in all sectors in this country is accelerated and advanced by leveraging on digital platforms. I have been a champion, and I continue to champion the need to leverage telecommunications platform and technology for national development. We have seen how it has contributed to the GDP of countries around the world, from North America to Europe. In Nigeria, we have statistics that testify to this. From 9.1, some 3 years back, we're at 10.1 right now. We have seen that the more we have the penetration of broadband, the more we empower our startups, the more we can empower our youth to be self-employed. They can develop content, leveraging on the Web 2.0 as we have it. At the NCC, we have seen a regulator that has leveraged regulatory excellence for national development. So we talk about regulation for development, not regulation for the sake of it, not regulation that is over-regulation, but rather regulation that is fastidious, regulation that is consistent, regulation that seeks to advance the growth of this country in all sectors. We are not there yet. We want to improve quality of service. We want broadband access to go to every home, which is the last mile. We are now at 33%. We have a goal of reaching 70% in 2 years. We want fiber optic connection to reach 774 local governments across the country. We want a more efficient use of our spectrum resources in this country. Above all, we want to place this country on the path of being able to enjoy the 5G, which is just around the corner, that will give us the fastest connection speed ever, that will enhance and deepen business growth and development, that will enhance e-government and e-governance as the case may be. I've been privileged to be at the center of a pivotal industry, a dynamic industry, which has pervaded all of our lives, from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G. Once again, my CV is before you, distinguished senators. I would like to stop here and listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Distinguished colleagues, let me take the opportunity to ask the first question. One of our colleagues here, Senator Bulu Semos, about 2 weeks ago, when we were discussing insecurity, especially kidnappings in the country, said that we can address this problem, especially kidnapping, where the kidnappers negotiate ransom with their funds, and yet neither the NCC nor the operators nor the security agencies are able to track down these kidnappers in time to rescue people. How, because you are still, I think, a commissioner in NCC, tell the Senate how the cooperation of these agencies with the NCC will ensure that kidnappers are arrested and appropriate action taken. But essentially, how can we really get to the kidnappers while they are using these funds? You just take note of the questions. Next will be Senator Taslim Folari.
Thank you, Mr. President, sitting in chair, my highly respected colleagues. Mr. President, standing before us today is a ministerial nominee from your state. He's still the executive, one of the 3 executive commissioners in NCC, an accomplished author and very cerebral. Mr. President, unlike other states, we wouldn't be asking for this man to bow and go. We want to showcase our contribution to the Federal Executive Council. And I want to thank you for asking the first question. I would also like to ask him a question, Mr. President. You talked about this broadband, but we know it isn't working the way you make it sound. Could you tell us what the issues are, what the challenges are? Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari.
My respected colleague, Oyo State. Mr. President, in 1991, when Sunday Dare was doing his first degree in Ahmadu Bello University, I was doing my master's. I was just in front of the bar one day, and he said, Egbon, he said, you are from Ogbomoso. I was meeting him for the first time at that time. I said, yes. Since that time, up to date, he has maintained a very good relationship with me. Before that time, along the line, they went on exile, and he was always calling from Washington to find out, Egbon, Kilo Shelele politically, that what is happening at home politically. I said, look, things are moving on well. When we're now moving to democracy, when they came back from their exile, we maintained that relationship. In 2016, when he was being screened at this place for NCC, I was chairing the ICT committee. Olamide Khan was the deputy chairman for communication. We went for the screening, and that day, myself and Olamide Khan, we now stood there for him that, look, we can assure you that he will do his best to the communication industry. Within that 2 years and now, he was able to produce this book, regulating telecommunication for national development. And those who are part of the team, we asked him at that time that, look, what will be your contribution? How the way they are using telecommunication as a higher revenue generation for the country. He said at that time that, look, if people can give us the enabling law, we will be able to, if you are able to amend the law, the current law, we will be able to increase the revenue that is coming. And I'm happy when he was introducing himself, he said something like that. My colleague, I'm appealing to you. I'm presenting Sunday Dare as a nominee. And we are not saying you should take a bow. We even want him to show the experience and the brain he has so that people can appreciate the stuff we are presenting. Thank you very much.
Very good one. The DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President, sitting as chairman. Ovie Omo Agege, Delta Central Senatorial District. Yes. First, I want to thank Mr. President for this nomination. This nominee is a nominee that will add value to the Federal Executive Council. I have no doubt whatsoever. I stand today to honor your service and your contributions to this country, both while in exile, in your fight for restoration of democracy, and the services you've rendered since you came into governance. I honor you for all of them. Now, my question. You served in the NCC. The first question that was asked of you by Mr. President was a question I was going to ask. But I haven't been asked. I want to follow up on that by asking you if you feel that the sanctions and the penalty regime as contained in the NCC Act is sufficient to deal with issues arising from non-registration of SIM cards, because that is the thrust of the problem we have today, where you have people using phones with SIM cards that are not registered to commit these crimes, not just banditry, but kidnapping and what have you. In your service in NCC, did you try to seek the enforcement of the penalty and of the sanctions regime as therein contained? Or did you at any time consider those sanctions regime inadequate? And if inadequate, would you be recommending, what would you be recommending as a more effective sanctions regime in the event you find yourself as Minister of Communications? That would be my question. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kola Balogun.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Kola Balogun. I represent Oyo South Senatorial District. I rise to join my brothers from Oyo State to congratulate our brother, Mr. Sunday Akindare, for this opportunity for him to serve as a Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, we have a saying in Oyo State. Please permit me to say it first in Yoruba, then I will tell you what it is in English. We say, Ajíṣebí Ọ̀yọ́ láàrí, Ọ̀yọ́ ò ṣe bí ẹnì kankan. In other words, in other words, Ọ̀yọ́ is a pace-setter state. When my colleagues were making their submission, they said we are not interested in bowing and going because we have a young man whom we are sure will not only represent Oyo State adequately, will represent Nigeria whatever portfolio is given by Mr. President. As you can see from his CV, he's a scholar, he's cerebral, he's intelligent, he's educated. Mr. President, with all this, I'm sure that Mr. President is simply putting a round peg in a round hole. But now I have a question for you. Now that the country is trying to move from a resource-based economy to knowledge-based economy, what would you be suggesting to Mr. President as a way for us to move as a nation from a resource-based economy to a knowledge-based economy, given your background and your skill as an IT expert? Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir.
For your mic.
Thank you. You can respond to the questions, the first set.
Thank you, distinguished Senate President. I want to thank you for your question. I think that question perhaps is the most important and critical question, timely in every sense of the word, to pose right now, not just to the NCC as the regulator of the telecommunications industry, but also to our country's security agencies. The issue of kidnapping worries us, not just as regulators, but also as citizens of this country. And we have watched across the country how we have seen a spike in the level of kidnapping. The starting point really is that to arrest kidnapping, it is a collaborative effort. Because NCC as a regulator, without making any excuses, does not have prosecutorial powers. But we do have what we call the SIM registration database, a database inclusive of 172 million subscribers in this country. It is expected to have every SIM card registered with the necessary information and data, biometrics, as the case may be. The process works in such a way that the operators collect this information, they pass them on to the regulator, and we begin a process of verification or scrubbing. Because very often we have found that the biometrics are not done properly, the information, certain fields are missing, and in most cases we found that the pictures used are either very fuzzy, they are not clear. So we have been able to work on that process. In the last 3 years, we have worked with NIMSI. They have the equipment and the software to scrub this data and get them back to the NCC. This is still ongoing. We have done well over 50 million, and the process is a bit tedious because it's dealing with technology, but it's been speeded up. But it is important to make the point that we have captured at least 85% of every SIM card in this country in terms of registration. In terms of connection, every SIM card in use is connected to the network. So yes, it is possible to trace the kidnappers. But until kidnapping occurs, until that phone call is made, there's no real-time surveillance. There's no software to be able to monitor 172 million lines around the clock. What we have had, distinguished Senate President and distinguished senators, through collaborative effort with the Office of the ONSA, the DSS, and the police. We have had telephone numbers brought to our attention immediately. NCC had gone ahead on several occasions to query the database we have and the database the MNOs have, like MTN, Glo, and we've been able to extract the needed information, pass the information in real time to the DSS and the security agencies, and we have had several apprehensions. People have been arrested. It is difficult for me to disclose the process of triangulation and the other processes that the ONSA and the rest really go through. But I know that we're working towards creating a more robust system, leveraging on technology. We have a number of proof of concepts because we're trying to benchmark and see what other countries have done in order to reduce the crime of kidnapping as we have it in our country. And I think the most significant step in that direction is the attempt to create a national citizens database. All the reporting data gathering agencies have been directed by the Federal Executive Council to submit all of their data to NIMSI. And NIMSI will go through, provide every Nigerian with a NIN, as the case may be, update their fingerprint, biometrics called 442, and once we have that together, any Nigerian, we can simply query that database. Your telephone number will be there, the house address will be there, and be able to locate. So, distinguished Senate President, the NCC is working actively and collaboratively with the Office of National Security Advisor, the DSS, and the police. But the details of this, I cannot disclose. But NCC on its part is working to sanitize the SIM card registration. And distinguished Deputy Senate President, I think this ties into your question, so I take your question along with it. The SIM card, pre-SIM card menace, we've had several arrests across the country, in Kano, in Sokoto. We are gaining on them to the extent that we've leveraged a lot of sanctions on the telcos. We don't do name and shame as we had in the case of the MTN, but as we speak, there's an ongoing audit of all the MNOs, almost a repeat of what happened in 2015 that led to the 300 billion naira fine. We have 3 task forces in Lagos, and in another 2 weeks, they will come back with detailed findings. We will know the operators that have given out SIM cards that have not been properly registered. Distinguished Senator Teslim Folarin, thank you very much for your question on broadband. Nigeria, 3 years ago, had what we want to call a broadband challenge. And the federal government, under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, came up with the National Broadband Plan, which had been in the works. But because the government has created a very suitable environment for telecom regulation, the target for the broadband plan was to have, by 2018, 30% broadband penetration. That is to the last mile. As at the end of 2018, NCC was able to meet that target, but also exceeded by 3.1. We ran it up the year with 33.1% broadband penetration. But are we there yet? We're not there yet. The goal is to get to 70% broadband penetration. Right now, 65 million Nigerians have broadband, out of 192 million. And the NCC, in order to make sure that we accelerate broadband penetration, because right now we have capacity at our shores, Main 1, Glo 1, Sat 1. The NCC is investing in building broadband infrastructure, the backbone that will take this capacity to 774 local government. Each local government will have fiber optic laid with a point of access, POA. And that is just beginning the process of digitization. So broadband is important. The NCC also licensed 7 infraco companies. These are infrastructure companies that will lay fiber optic of about 291,000 kilometers across the country. It's been determined that we need a minimum of 310,000 kilometers of fiber optic to be able to provide that last mile connectivity to Nigerians. And these infraco companies are licensed on a regional basis, the 6 geopolitical regions in the country, and Lagos got a separate license because clearly it is the telecom headquarters of our country. And let me just say quickly on broadband, we have also created a more efficient use of spectrum. We have created a spectrum market where you can lease or you can trade your spectrum. Right now we have a lot of portfolio spectrum. Those that have received our licenses, they paid for the spectrum, but they're not using it for the purposes needed. So we created this market. Agitation for this has been going on for almost 10 years in the industry, but under the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, because of the massive support we have received, we've been able to start the spectrum trading market late last year. Let me go to distinguished Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari. I thank you for your kind words. I thank you for your nostalgic recollection. And I recall that when a committee from this distinguished Senate graciously cleared me in 2016 to be an executive commissioner, that was one of the questions posed. What will you do differently? And as I stand before you today, I can say the NCC as a regulator has recorded successes on behalf of this country in areas that has placed Nigeria ahead of several other comparative countries in the sub-region. Nigeria is clearly on the path of digitization. We have been able to advance or deepen the investment in the telecom industry to 70 billion plus. We have been able to US dollars. We've been able to increase the contribution of the telecom industry to the GDP from 9.1 in 2015 to 10.1 the first quarter of 2019. We've been able to increase from the days of NITEL when we started with 500,000 or thereabout lines. In the last 3 years, we've moved from 115,000 subscriber line to 172 million subscribers in this country. That's deepened telephoning because these people buy data, they leverage on the OTT, over-the-top technology like WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram. The price of data has also come down comparatively. So for 1 gig of data going for just about 1,000 naira, most Nigerians can afford to buy data and also do a lot of things with their data. We have set targets for ourselves in NCC. We're working, striving to do better because there's still a lot to do. And I think the most important is that as a stakeholder manager, I've been able to work very closely with the critical stakeholders, which includes this particular assembly, from the MDAs to the consumer, which is the king, to members of the security, to states and local government. I've been able to deepen relationship, solve problems, but also work with the operators in the aspect of enhancing their capacity, particularly so that we can improve quality of service. Distinguished Deputy Senate President, I think I've taken your question. I will now take the question from distinguished Senator Kola Balogun. Knowledge-based economy. You're absolutely right. We live in an era of knowledge-based economy. And the talk is often made about what is the new oil. Data is the new oil. It's almost virtually impossible to do anything without connectivity, without data. We're so dependent on data now. And we have seen how we have a 17 billion US dollar investment alone in this industry. The answer here is, with the support of the government, which the NCC is expecting, if NCC as a regulator gets the subsidy that is needed to support the infrastructure company that will bring the capacity we have lying down on our shores to build a national backbone across the country, a network that will make a difference for our universities, for our industries, for our corporations. That will make a difference. Thank you very much.
Before I call for the next set of questions, I'll just advise that you try to be brief, but of course, covering the details, because I have a list of over 20 senators who would like to ask questions. So the next set will be Senator Adiola Solomon Olamilekon, Senator Gabriel Soswam, the Deputy Leader, and the Chief Whip, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague. Mr. President, I want to congratulate the nominee, who is a brother, a friend, and a very close associate of over 20 years. Mr. President, Mr. Sunday Akindare has been nominated by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as one of those that should assist the President in carrying out his duty. Mr. President, as the earlier speakers have said, the contribution of Mr. Sunday Dare towards the nation building over the years has been well spent in his CV that we have before us. But sir, we have decided to keep him here so that we can ask some questions bordering on the nation communication sector. I could recollect that the first few motions that was taken by this night Senate borders and centers around communication sector. And having you here today, you are standing from two fronts. One, we are screening you, and two, to provide answers to some of the challenges that we have in the communication sector. So, along that line, I will ask these two questions. Number one, on the area of cybercrime, you will quite agree with me that there is a rise in cyber internet fraud as far as Nigeria is concerned. And there was a motion that was moved on the floor of the Senate that centers around this. What is your views and what is NCC doing along this line? Number two, in the area of cord drop, where Nigerians have been paying unduly for services that were not given to them. Unwarranted messages by the telcos and money being deducted from time to time. What are the actions taken by the National Communications Commission regarding this major issue? Once more, I want to congratulate you in advance. These are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. President, my name is Towas Swam, representing Benue Northeast. Mr. President, I want to appreciate the senators from Oyo for having a good product and not being ashamed to showcase it. Akin, let me take you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but an area that based on your CV, I believe you have the competence to address, as you have addressed competently, the telecommunications sector. You, as a student of international relations, you will agree with me that in the 70s and 80s, Nigeria had a foreign policy trust. In the 70s, it was to assist African nations that were still under colonialism to be emancipated. And Nigeria played a very active role in doing that. But at the advent of this current democracy, President Obasanjo started, or rather focused on a different area of foreign policy. That was to attract foreign investment into our country and remove us from the pariah statute that we had enjoyed for some time. Akin, as a student of foreign policy, will you tell Nigerians and these hallowed chambers whether Nigeria still has any foreign policy? And if your answer is that Nigeria has a foreign policy, will you agree that it has become a candidate for change? And if your answer is no, what would you, based on your CV here, if the president decides to post you as foreign minister, and your answer is no, what will you propose to the president to constitute, or rather our focus as a nation, to be our foreign policy? I say this because about 2 weeks ago, the Senate President invited us for a courtesy court that was attended by the South African ambassador. And they had had cause to admonish the ambassador because of the maltreatment of Nigerians in South Africa. We have had this case in other countries as well. Now, we seem not to be responding because there is no concise foreign policy that would address these issues. Now, I've asked that is the first question. The second one, Mr. President, is that you know that the same telecommunication is closely related to foreign policies of other countries. You know that the fight between America and China is about Huawei. And so, as a telecom expert, based on your answers here, how will you link our foreign policy to the telecommunication that we are discussing here? Mr. President, these are my two questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. The nominee, Sir Sunday Dare. I want to join my other colleagues in congratulating you on your nomination by Mr. President. And I want to say that I'm very proud of you. Modern telecommunication depends on two major backbones: satellite backbone and the fiber optics. And I think Nigeria has opted for fiber optics. And in order to obtain the the 87 or the 97 penetration you are talking about. You have a very massive plan to lay kilometers, thousands of kilometers of fiber optics across the country. My concern, like the oil pipeline, where the right of way for the pipelines have not been well defined, which leads to damaging the oil pipelines. Is there any law put in place by NCC to guarantee the right of way for fiber optics laid across the country? Because once you damage the fiber optics at a particular point, it affects a large area. So, this is my concern, and I want to find out whether you have any plan, whether NCC has any plan or any law guaranteeing this right of way for fiber optics laid across the country. Because at times when you drive from Lagos to Abuja, you see some of those fiber optics by the roadside being damaged. So this is the question. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
The Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Oji Uzokalo. I represent Abia North. Mr. Nominee, congratulations for your appointment. Thank you. I have known you for possibly 1995, 96, and you're a very loyal fellow. When you were in Washington, I recommended you to the Minister of Information, Mrs. Akunyere, to hire you and bring you back home. And my question is very simple. How will all these multi-billion communication companies go public so Nigeria masses will benefit from the huge profit being rolled out every year? Because in other countries, all the companies that are in communication are public quoted. It's only in Nigeria, even MTN that have listed, they only listed to existing shareholders. They have not gone full public. How will they have gone public, but they didn't allow the smaller people to buy? The rights have not been issued properly. How would they ask them? They went public, they are not available. You are right. So how will other telecommunication companies go public so Nigerian people on the streets who are paying money to them can also get dividends every year? Secondly, if Mr. President decides to put you Minister of Information, how will you improve the media owners, their relationship with government? And because now the relationship of media owners are not getting any subsidy from government. There's only business. They are not getting business. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Order. Just manager, order. How will you be able to get media owners to get some concession in their import, like newsprint, ink, and all the rest of them? Because it is very, very, very important. The media is dying. And people, yes, there's no conflict of interest. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
You may answer the questions, please.
Mr. President, Senator Olamileko from Lagos, I thank you very much for your question. The challenges in the telecommunications industry are like no other. We have these challenges in this country. Several other countries have similar challenges. But how are we meeting, or how have we met these challenges? I think the major challenge we have really is that of telecommunications infrastructure. We do not have the level of telecommunications infrastructure that we need. And I will just give one single example. This country needs at least 180,000 BTSs, base transceiver stations. These are the long masts you see. We only have about 44,000 BTSs. That is an acute shortage of infrastructure. If we're able to ramp up the number of BTS we have across the country, connectivity will improve, business transaction will improve, startups, where we have a lot of youth, will also benefit massively. And you talked about cybercrime. Why cybercrime, fighting cybercrime, is largely statutorily the work of NITDA. The NCC, working with NITDA, also plays a role in monitoring cybercrime. As we speak now, the cybercrime law enacted in 2014, in the twilight of the administration, of the last administration, before APC came in, is now domiciled in the office of the National Security Advisor. So it's still a collaborative effort with NITDA taking the statutory, with UNSA, because it borders on security. You talked about drop calls. Yes, drop calls focuses on the quality of service. We have a benchmark for drop calls. That is, out of every 100 calls, at least 99 of those calls must go through. Yes, it's true. We still have drop calls back and forth. But we also have KPIs, key performance factors that we use. One of them, there are 4 of them actually. The call setup success rate, the channel congestion.
Mr. President, sir, he has 2 more minutes to go.
And NCC holds the operators to meeting these KPIs on a quarterly basis. And where an operator has fallen short, we have sanctioned them on a continuous basis. Comparatively, we have seen improvements when compared with other regulatory crimes in Ghana, in Kenya, but I think we can do better. It is a process, and NCC is doing all within its powers to make sure that the quality of service and the quality of experience of every subscriber in this country is such that it is acceptable and according to global standards. The unsolicited calls we have. In 2017, the NCC dedicated 1-year campaign to making sure that we fight against unsolicited calls. We introduced the Do Not Disturb, we introduced a short code 2442, and all any subscriber had to do was activate the 2442, and it stops any unsolicited messages coming to your phone. The second question, I'll take it very briefly. Distinguished Senator Gabriel, thank you for your question. On foreign policy. Yes, indeed. You outlined the trajectory that we have had over time. We also had a period of concentric circle, as the case may be. We had that of foreign direct investment, as the case may be. But let me say, any country's foreign policy is driven largely by the internal values of that country that is projected outside. And I think the starting point for the conception and the implementation of any new foreign policy as it is, with all the elements we've had in the past, they're still important. Foreign direct investment is important. Helping our neighbors as the most populous country in Africa is important. Serving as the leader of Africa is important. But also, improving our internal values will be critical towards developing a robust foreign policy. And I think we have seen this government trying to make sure that at a reputational level, Nigerians earn a lot of respect. Let me take the question by distinguished Senator Boroface. Fiber optic. Yes, fiber cuts are one of our biggest problems in this country because of digging. Yes. So we have the open access model in which we have a single duct. Instead of MNOs digging 5 places, you come under the open access model with a single pipe, and you can put the yellow, the blue, the red, and that reduces the ducts that you have to use. Finally, distinguished Senator Orji Kalu, I thank you for your question. And I will just take the last part of your question if I'm allowed to do that. I think that the firewall between the media and the government is important because it speaks to the independence of the media. The democracy we enjoy today is because the media has protected its independence very jealously. If the government provides subsidy, gives waivers, I think a part of that independence will be taken away. But I do agree, the media industry is under great stress because of the cost of newsprint. The appeal will be to the central bank to provide a forex window at an exchange rate that softens the ground for the newspaper industry to bring in the much needed materials for their production. Thank you very much.
Distinguished colleagues, we are stopping at 6 o'clock and we have 2 more nominees to go. So is it the wish of the Senate that the nominee takes a bow and go? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You can take a bow.
Thank you.
Sunday Dare, the last person that was screened by the Senate, is a commissioner in the Nigerian Communications Commission. And then that actually attracted quite a number of questions from the senators bordering on the issue of asking him what he thinks the Nigerian Communications Commission as a regulatory agency has been doing or will do better in trying to check criminal indulgence through mobile networks. I think he actually explained a lot of most of the questions they asked him. And I think the senators, from the resolutions and motions that were put forward to them by the Senate President, were satisfied with the answers he provided. Meanwhile, the screening is going to continue. The Senate is expecting the next nominee to come in, Musa Bello. Well, the President of the Senate had earlier announced that the Senate will still screen 2 more nominees before it winds off today's screening session. Coming in there is Musa Bello, the immediate past Minister of the Federal Capital Territory. He's the next ministerial nominee to be screened. He's being led by the Senior Special Advisor to the President on Legislative Matters, Senator Ita Enang.
Order.
Muhammad Musa Bello is now going to the podium to get set for the questions that will be coming from the senators. Muhammad Musa Bello is from Adamawa State.
Order. The visitors are making noise. Order. Order. Please, order. We have our guests here. Please, order.
Hey, these are senators.
Mr. President, the chambers is ready.
Distinguished colleagues, the nominee on the podium is the former Minister of the FCT, the nominee for Adamawa State, Alhaji Muhammad Bello. On behalf of all my colleagues here, I welcome you to the Senate. And we have your CV before us. However, you can still highlight anything that you feel you should emphasize. And of course, if you so wish, you can tell us even things that are outside of this CV. I want once again welcome you here, and you can address the Senate. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, Your Excellency, the Deputy President of the Senate, very distinguished principal officers of the Senate, distinguished senators. With your kind permission also, I want to recognize distinguished Senator Engineer Aisha Dahiru, who is the senator representing my constituency, Adamawa Central, together with the two senators representing Adamawa State, Senator Cliff Ishaya Abbo and Senator Bainos Daudayero. With your kind permission also, I would like to recognize Senator Philip Tanimo Aduda, the senator representing the FCT, where I spent 3.5 years as a public officer. With your kind permission, Your Excellency, I want to also just mention that Senators Ahmed Hassan Barata, who was a senator in the 7th Assembly, has graciously escorted me to this hall, together with Senator Ahmed Abubakar, who was a senator of the 8th Assembly. Also together with Honorable Musa Tanko Abari, who was a member of the House of Representatives representing the FCT in the year 1983. Then we have Honorable Zakaria Anguludobi, who was a member in the 7th Assembly. We also have, with your kind permission, AIG retired Nuhu Ribadu, as well as the chairman of my party in Adamawa State, and also the chairman of the APC in the FCT. I want to also use this opportunity to thank all those that have joined me here, both from the FCT as well as Adamawa State. Thank you, sir. Briefly, my name is Mohammed Musa Bello. I was born 60 years ago in Yola, Adamawa State. I did my primary school partly in Kaduna and Yola, and I finished my primary school in December of 1971 from Our Lady's High School, Kaduna. Thereafter, I proceeded to Barewa College, Zaria, where I finished my West African examination in June of 1976. I proceeded to Ahmadu Bello University, where I did my one-year School of Basic Studies, and then entered my first year as an undergraduate studying business administration in the ABU in September of 1977. I graduated from ABU in June of 1980 with a BSc degree in business administration. Thereafter, I commenced my career as a banker with Icon Limited Merchant Bankers in Lagos. In 1984, I was selected among young bankers across the world, and I joined a class of 52, AMP 52, in a bank in the US that was called JP Morgan. I was in a class of about 45 young bankers across the world, and at that time I was the only African. I did 6 months training in commercial banking and risk management, and I completed that in December of 1984. Thereafter, I came back to my job at Icon Limited Merchant Bankers, and then took some time off and studied for the master's degree in business administration, and which I concluded in 1986. After working for some time with the bank, I moved back to the private sector, where I worked for about 20 years before I took on my first public sector appointment. And that was in October of 2006, when President Olusegun Obasanjo appointed me as the Presidential Committee Chairman for the Hajj Commission. At that time, government wanted to revolutionize Hajj, and they decided to get somebody with a purely private sector background. Because of the time it took for us to get screened, because it coincided with Hajj for that year, I operated with a team of about 7 people as a presidential committee. Thereafter, the Senate graciously approved my appointment as the first executive chairman of the National Hajj Commission. That was in May of 2007. I was saddled at that time with the role of being the first pioneer chairman of that organization, also saddled with the National Hajj Commission Act, which earlier on was passed by the National Assembly. And then we started over a period of 8 years with a team of dedicated commissioners with tremendous support from the National Assembly through the two committees on foreign affairs. And I was able to basically resuscitate Hajj and put it on a threshold of best practice management. And over the years, we were saddled with the responsibility of implementing the act. I do recall at that time, I worked very closely with members of the National Assembly, particularly in the House of Representatives as well as the Senate. I do recall at that time, the Senate leader, Senator Taslim Folarin, also served as the Amiru Hajj, and I worked very closely with him. And I'm so happy also to see him here. Having said that, basically, the first 4 years I spent in the Hajj Commission trying to salvage it from what Hajj used to be in Nigeria. And then in 2011, President Goodluck Jonathan found it fit to reappoint me for a second tenure, which I did from 2011 to May of 2015 when I finished my second tenure. And during the 8-year period, I worked very closely with members of the National Assembly through the House Committee on Foreign Affairs as well as the Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs. And we were able to take Hajj to the point where it is now. And of course, I didn't do it alone. I got tremendous support from members of the National Assembly and from members of the executive. I do recall that distinguished Senator Odua was one time Minister of Aviation, and she knew the kind of support she gave me with all the airline flights and so on, and I'm forever grateful, ma'am. I also recall that Senator Solomon Adeoye, when he was in the House, and was the chairman of the, I think it is the Watchdog, Public Accounts Committee. Initially, I didn't understand him, but I'm forever grateful to you because he told me, he said that what we are doing here is to protect you from going to jail, and really it has helped us as public officers. Thank you very much, sir. So after my 8-year work as the pioneer chairman of the National Hajj Commission, Mr. President graciously nominated me to serve as a minister during his first tenure. And I got the opportunity to come into these hollowed chambers, and I was screened here, and eventually I was appointed minister, and then assigned the portfolio of the Minister of the FCT. And I found the assignment in the FCT, with your kind permission, Your Excellency, very interesting, because as you all know, the Federal Capital Territory is a creation of law, and all activities in the FCT are governed by law. But most importantly, the National Assembly also served as the National Assembly of the FCT, going by Section 299 of the Constitution, where the FCT was regarded as if it were a state. So during this period, quickly and briefly, we spent a lot of time with my team trying to rediscover the FCT and take it back to the threshold of what the founding fathers envisaged when the FCT was created. And I think it is with appreciation that we should acknowledge the past military rulers, because their decision to establish a center of unity for all of us is something that they have bequeathed to this great nation. So in the FCT, we came at a time when the resources were not adequate. And we came at a time when the public perception of the typical FCT officer was not good. So I and my team spent tremendous amount of time to see what we could do. And we identified that the greatest thing we needed to do was to look at the infrastructure. And in doing so, we looked at infrastructures that we felt would provide the greatest benefit to the largest number of people. So we targeted the road network system, the railway, and to a certain extent also we targeted water supply. And that is why, for those of you that were in the 8th Senate, you will recall that in May of 2015, if you were to enter Abuja from the airport axis, you would have meandered through so many detours because so many of the bridges were not completed. So we targeted that, completed all the bridges, and then made sure that at least from that sector of the city, you could enter it seamlessly without any problem. And then we put up a bridge that was linking the main arterial road from the airport into the city, which is called Bill Clinton Bridge. And now it's there. When you drive there, you think it has been there all the years. But in so doing, I want to really pay tribute to one of my predecessors as minister, who is seated in these hollow chambers, Senator Alero, because he was the person that made sure that the master plan that incorporated the airport expressway was initiated, and that is why you have that 10-lane road there, and we are eternally grateful to you, sir. So having tackled the airport arterial road, we looked at the entry point from the Kubwa Niger State axis through the Zuba, and thereafter also we completed a number of bridges, and now it is there. The one that took some time is entering Abuja through the Nasarawa State, through the Nyanya AY axis. We completed Goodluck Jonathan Expressway, opened up the area. And the whole idea is that we envisage that by so doing, it will make it easier for all the hundreds of thousands of commuters that live in the satellite towns to make it easy for them to come into the city. And then, of course, it's public knowledge that we completed the Abuja Light Rail, which was on the drawing board and was under construction for quite some time. And basically, we did that by making sure that the project was funded, and it's now a done deal. And we do hope that the 9th Senate will approve the pending order from pending request from the Ministry of the FCT for the approval of the foreign loan that will enable the FCT procure the relevant coaches. But all the railway stations, 12 of them along the corridor, have been. So finally, without taking too much of your time, sir, we realize also that a city like Abuja, for it to be a city of our dream, and also to make it one of the best cities in the world and the first city in Africa, we had to go back to the basics and ensure that everything was done according to the rule of law. Land administration was a huge challenge. It reached a point whereby if you had a land document, you were not sure whether it was genuine or not genuine. And we had so many problems of double allocations and all which I'm sure some distinguished members are aware. So we revolutionized the land administration and set up a system that made sure that there was proper synergy by all the land departments. It took some time, but at the end of the day now, I can assure the general public that any document you get from the Ministry of the FCT that is land-related, you can go to sleep because you know it is genuine. And we also created a system of alternative dispute resolution with respect to land matters, because we realized that there were litigations in the court, some of them 20 years old, and we realized that at the end of the day, everybody suffers. The litigant suffers because of the fees, and the city suffers because as long as a land is not...
Honorable Minister.
Yes.
You have, there are a lot of questions to be asked. So I will ask you to round up so that we go into the question session.
Thank you very much, distinguished Senator. In rounding up, I want to thank you particularly. I didn't mention the Senate President, but he has been extremely helpful to me during all the years that I had mentioned that I was in the Hajj Commission, and even during my first tenure in the Ministry of the FCT. And of course, I want to thank Mr. President, who found me worthy, out of so many qualified candidates from my state, to reappoint me to come for this screening. And finally, I cannot complete this address without acknowledging the support I got from Senator Dino Melaye, who was my chairman when I was minister in the FCT. He has a tremendous knowledge and passion for Abuja, and I worked very closely with him. I want to also thank Senator OK Jeff Emmanuel, who was a member of the House when he was chairman of the House Committee on the FCT. And of course, other members of the House that I served under were Hema Hembe, Sergius S. Ogun, and so many members here who have worked through it. And finally, distinguished senators, I have had a very good working relationship with the National Assembly, and I have come with a number of National Assembly members. And if people say I have been successful in my public sector career, I must sincerely say it was because of the support of the National Assembly. And I think I'll be right if I say that by association, I'm a member of the National Assembly. And I do hope that distinguished Senator and Senate President, what other members of the National Assembly have enjoyed, if you agree that by association I'm a member, I will appreciate if I enjoy it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Now I can see order. Distinguished colleagues, I can see that this club of National Assembly membership is becoming very popular. So you are welcome. Senator Mohamed Ademalero.
Thank you, Mr. President, Secretary of the Chair, my distinguished colleagues, the immediate First Minister of FCT, my successor, and now also a ministerial nominee. Mr. President, I think the nominee has appeared before the Senate almost 30 times. First, when he was appointed as chairman of the Hajj Commission, he was screened by a committee of the Senate, and he was passed. Secondly, in 2015, when he was nominated as Minister of the Federal Republic, he appeared before us here in this Hallowed chamber. We screened him, we asked him several questions, and he answered them eloquently. Mr. President, from what he said, he gave us his performance as chairman of Hajj Commission. He equally abridged his performance as Minister of FCT. Mr. President, there is no point we continue to do.
No, that's clear. No.
Mr. President, I don't think there is any need for us to delay asking him to go. He has done very well. He has mentioned critical infrastructure that is needed in FCT. And what impressed me most, Mr. President, all abandoned infrastructure he inherited. He continued with them, and he completed quite a number of them. And he also decided to extend development at the satellite towns. And that's why people are no longer living in the city. The city is now decongested. People are now going to live in satellite towns. Mr. President, not only that, water supply is very, very critical to a city like Abuja. When I was minister, I did my very best to complete phase 3 and phase 4 of the water treatment plant. And from what he said, he was able to complete it when he became Minister of FCT. There are so many things that need to be said, but I plead with my colleagues, particularly from the other side. No objection. Here from this side, I'm sure there will be no objection. So, Mr. President, with your kind permission, I want you to put the question. Let the nominee take a bow and go. Thank you very much.
Senator Aishatu Dahiru Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. President, sitting in chair, my distinguished colleagues. I would like to use this opportunity to say to my colleagues a very big thank you and to reiterate to them that Adamawa Caucus will forever remain grateful for listen to me, for the support being accorded to us right from the inception of this ninth Senate.
Yes.
My nominee, let me start by congratulating you for being renominated by Mr. President to be the Minister, Federal Republic of Nigeria. You have proved to Mr. President that your initial nomination was not a mistake. And for those of us who knows you years back, are always proud of your record, because wherever you walk, you leave a track record of integrity, landmark of fairness, equity, and justice to everyone. Mr. President, sitting in chair, my distinguished colleagues, this is one Nigerian who is down to earth. This is one Nigerian whom when a during ministerial duration, he drives in a convoy of only 2 vehicles. This is one Nigerian who is a silent achiever. My distinguished colleagues, he is a rare Nigerian. So at this point, Mr. President, sitting in chair, my distinguished colleagues, having been screened so many times by this distinguished Halo Chamber, I would really appreciate and crave the indulgence of my distinguished colleague to accord him all the privileges he deserves. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Binos Dauda Yaro.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Binos Yaro, representing Adamawa South. Today, I'm a proud member of this National Assembly because the candidate coming from a state is a product that everybody can see, is well packaged, is well qualified, does not require to be marketed. Mr. President, I believe the CV we received today, if we had got it yesterday, there would have been no need to even ask him to even make any statement, because this is very, very comprehensive. And the fact that Mr. President, the President of the Federal Republic, President Buhari, found him suitable, found him competent, only 11 out of the more than 50 senators that ministers that served to be renominated, indicates that he has performed very well to the satisfaction of Mr. President. Therefore, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, I say, let's accord this competent gentleman all the privileges that he deserves. Thank you.
Senator Elisha Clifford Ishaku Abo.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. As you can see, from both sides of the aisle, this side and this side, this Senate unanimously agreed that this illustrious son of Adamawa State. Let me tell you, Mr. President, this CV is just an abridged version. If we bring complete CV, we will be reading it like in volumes. This is just an abridged version. As you can see that from this side of the aisle and from that side, our illustrious son has built bridges over time. The shout of bow and go is even coming more from PDP. I follow my colleagues from Adamawa State and indeed the entire Senate to ask our brother from Adamawa State to please take a bow and go. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, is it the wish of this Senate? No, I have not completed yet. Is it the wish of the Senate that the nominee takes a bow and go? I have not put the question yet. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Take a bow and go.
That was the screening of the immediate past Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Musa Bello from Adamawa State. Well, he took time to present his achievements in the last 4 years, and then senators, the five senators who spoke concurred to what he has presented, and then the entire Senate resolved that he should take a bow and go. Now we expect from the announcement of the President of the Senate before this particular nominee that the Senate will take one more nominee before it closes. So at the moment, we expect that one more nominee might be coming in for the screening. In all, the Senate has screened 12 nominees.
Order. Guys. Order. 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 Distinguished senators, order. Our visitors are here.
The next nominee to be screened is coming in right in after the Special Assistant to the President of National Assembly Matters, Senator Itainang. She is the third female nominee to be screened in this ongoing exercise. She is Sadia Umar Farouk from Zamfara State. Federal Commission of National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration and a Master's degree in International Affairs and Diplomacy. She is now heading to the podium to answer questions from the senators. And it appears this might be the last nominee for today's screening.
Distinguished colleagues, we have with us Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, the Honorable Federal Commissioner of National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons, the Zamfara nominee. Honorable Commissioner, on behalf of my colleagues, I want to welcome you to the Senate chambers and congratulate you on your nomination by Mr. President. This Senate is very gender sensitive. We always give support to our female senators and indeed any female stakeholder that we interact with. So you have the entire Senate behind you. We have your CV circulated to all of us, but you still have the opportunity to highlight anything in the CV that you feel very strongly about that will help this Senate in the screening exercise. And you can equally tell the Senate anything that may be outside the CV but is also significant and important in this exercise. Once again, you are welcome and you can address the Senate.
Members of these very hallowed chambers, my very distinguished senators from my state, Senator Sahabiau, representing Zamfara North Federal Constituency, Senator Hassan Muhammad, representing Zamfara Central, and Senator Anka representing Zamfara West. My dear distinguished sisters of the Senate, I'm really very privileged to be in your midst this evening. Mr. President, distinguished senators, let me start by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making this possible, for all his blessings. And also, I must recognize and appreciate the presence of my dear mother here, who has groomed me to be a very responsible member of the society. I thank you very much, Ogo. I must also, Mr. President, distinguished senators, sincerely appreciate Mr. President, the President of this country, President Muhammadu Buhari, for having this confidence in me by nominating me as one of the ministers of this great nation. I'm sure Mr. President has no doubt in his mind that I will not fail him, I will not fail these very distinguished chambers, and I will not fail the Federal Republic of Nigeria in the discharge of my responsibilities if given the opportunity. Mr. President, distinguished senators, I'm sure you have my CV with you, and looking at these very distinguished chambers, I've seen very, very familiar faces of brothers and sisters that we've worked together with, that have come a long way in our struggle to be where we are today. Let me mention but a few. Senator Danjuma Ogoje, who fondly calls me for life. He calls me for life because I was then the interim treasurer of the APC. And I was very, very serious with my work. And each time they come, they have to pamper me and say, you are for life, treasurer for life, before I will actually, do what they want me to do. So, distinguished senators, I am a party person. I'm a very devoted member of my party. And if given the opportunity, I will do my best to make sure that I contribute my own quota to the development of this country, as I have exhibited in my previous assignment, or my current assignment that I'm on. I've been given the responsibility to cater for the most vulnerable people of our society, people that have been displaced by one kind of disaster or the other. I've traveled widely in this country, breadth and length of this country, to look at these people, to support them, to protect them, to give them succor. So, distinguished senators, this is all I can say. I can see that I'm already accepted in these chambers. And let me say one more thing, distinguished senators. My journey into politics actually started right here in this very distinguished house, because I served in the National Assembly of the 4th Assembly, and my second office used to be up there. I always come to the gallery to listen to the senators, their debates, their deliberations, and that was where I got my interest to be a politician. So thank you very much. Yes, I was always up there. Yes. So this is my first constituency, Your Excellency, distinguished senators.
Distinguished colleagues, let me call the minority leader to speak on behalf of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, sitting as the chair. The nominee, having established her DNA in the National Assembly, can now take a bow and go.
The Senate Leader.
Mr. President, sitting in the chair, my distinguished colleagues, I know the nominee, from our antecedents, not in the National Assembly, but in the CPC, where we started before we graduated into the APC. She has been a very hardworking, like she said, dogged party person. I know when we started the journey, we had several brush in and outs with her. And she is a lady in whose intellect I sincerely believe. And I am sure, with the dangerous sensibility of this Senate and the way in which the Senate has taken this gender sensitivity very, very seriously, I will support the position of the minority leader that the nominee should bow and go. I so submit.
Well, distinguished colleagues, before I put the question, let me make remarks. The nominee, of course, is currently serving as the Federal Commissioner of the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons. And of course, we have been witnesses to what she has been doing with her current assignment. When we say the female nominees should take a bow and go, we are simply according them that privilege because all the female nominees that have come before this Senate so far have demonstrated clearly exceptional capacity, exceptional commitment, and I have no doubt that they will contribute very well and meaningfully to the development of this country as ministers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And you have great partners in the National Assembly to work with you. So we pray for you, and of course, that we are able to give you the kind of support that you will need when you are a minister or whatever ministry you may be assigned to. But we are gender sensitive because this country cannot develop without the participation of our female stakeholders or the female gender generally. So with this brief remarks, I'll put the question. Those in favor of the motion that the nominee takes a bow and go, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You can now take a bow and go.
that was the screening of Sadia Omar Farouk from Zamfara State. Well, it's the tradition as well that all female nominees don't need to be drilled. They'll just take a bow and leave. And that is actually what has happened here. But then it's also generally agreed that these nominees have actually deserved the appointment going by their credentials and by the past offices they've held. For today, the Senate has screened a total of 13 ministerial nominees. The first was Tayo Alau Saudura, Mustafa Shehuri, Abubakar Aliyu, Bashir Magashi, Timipriya Silva, Ramatu Tijani Aliyu, Richard Adebayo, Zubairu Dada, Chris Ngige, Muhammad Abdullahi, Sunday Dare, Musa Bello, and Sadia Omar Farouk. Well, as we can see there, another nominee is coming in, Zainab Ahmed, the immediate past Minister of Finance. She is the next nominee that will be screened. The Senate actually are taking quite a number of them today. This will be the fourth female nominee to be screened by the Senate since this exercise commenced on Wednesday, and the third female today.
Distinguished colleagues, the nominee before us is the immediate past Minister of Finance, Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. And she is nominee for Kaduna State. On behalf of my colleagues, I want to welcome you to the Senate chambers. And let me also repeat what I said when we had female nominees. This Senate is very gender sensitive. We want to encourage our female to contribute very well and very meaningfully to national development. And therefore, we are here for you. We'll be there for you when you will be minister by the grace of God, so that you operate optimally to the benefit of our dear motherland. We have your CV, but you are still at liberty to highlight and emphasize on anything that you feel the Senate needs to note for the purpose of this exercise. And where you have issues that are not reflected here and you feel very strongly about them, you can tell the Senate to take note. With this, once again, I want to welcome you to the Senate, and you can address the Senate. Thank you.
Deputy Senate President, Senate Leader, Minority Leader, distinguished senators, please permit me to recognize specially the senators, my senators from Kaduna State, Senator Dr. Ubasani, representing Kaduna Central, Senator Suleiman Kwari, representing Kaduna North, Senator Andrew Mala, representing Kaduna South. Distinguished President, I also wear the hat of partly coming from Nasarawa State because my husband is from Nasarawa. So I want to especially also recognize the senators from Nasarawa. Distinguished senators, thank you very much for accommodating my participation in this program today at this very late hour. I appreciate it. I want to thank Almighty Allah for the opportunity He has given me in life, and also remember to thank my late father who has put me on the path that has brought me here today. But special thanks go to His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, for deeming it fit to have appointed me as a minister in the cabinet of 2015 to 2019, and also nominating me for the next cabinet. My name is Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. I am a ministerial nominee representing Kaduna State. I was born on the 16th of June 1960, which means I'm 59 years old. I did my primary school all in Kaduna, secondary school in Kaduna. I attended the Ahmadu Bello University Zaria and graduated in 1981 with a BSc degree in accounting. I did my NYSC in Kaduna with a firm of chartered accountants in 1981-1982. After my NYSC, I was first employed by the Kaduna State government in the Ministry of Finance. And 2 years after, I was now employed by the Nigerian External Telecommunications, formerly NET, now subsequently it became NITEL, as an accounting officer. I rose in NITEL from an accounting officer to Deputy General Manager in charge of corporate treasury. And in 2002, I was moved from NITEL to its subsidiary, the Mobile Telecommunications Limited, MTEL, where I was assigned first as Deputy General Manager Finance, and I rose to be the Chief Finance Officer. I was the Chief Finance Officer in MTEL for 5 years. In 2019, the Kaduna State Governor appointed me to head the Kaduna Investment Company. As the Managing Director of Kaduna Investment Company, my responsibility was to steer the state towards the path of industrial development. After spending just 1.5 years, the then President appointed me to the board of the Nigerian EITI in August 2010, and subsequently in November 2010, I was appointed as the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian EITI in Haiti. I worked in Haiti for 5 years. I met an organization that was in dire straits. We were facing the threat of being expelled from that body. Within 5 months, we were able to redirect the organization, achieve the requirements, the EITI compliant requirements, and also during my tenure, I was able to conduct 2 circles of oil and gas industry audit covering a period of 6 years, and then 2 circles of the solid minerals industry audit. We started the solid minerals industry audit covering a period of 7 years. We also started the first of its kind statutory disbursement audit, which was also for another 5-year period. In 2011, Nigeria was adjudged to be the best implementing country in the EITI. At that time, the EITI had 35 member countries. Having completed my tenure in November 2015, and also the president, while he was campaigning during that year, had made commitments to the electorate that he was going to reform the oil and gas industry and cited the reforms that are recommended in the Naiti audit findings. I think, Mr. President, that might be the reason why I was elected to be in the cabinet of President Muhammad Buhari. I was assigned as the Minister of State in the Ministry of Budget and National Planning. As a Minister of State working within the ministry, our function was to make sure that plans are directly linked to budget so that spending is prioritized to meet the priorities of government. I was responsible for budget preparation, budget implementation, also monitoring and evaluation. We also prepare medium-term expenditure frameworks, a 3-year plan that guides government functions. While I was in the Ministry of Budget and National Planning, I was appointed to coordinate the donor activities in the country. So we were responsible for interfacing with donors as well as for development projects as well as aid. I was also the minister that was responsible for coordinating the National Social Investment Program. So we started from 0 to 10 million beneficiaries by the time I left the Ministry of Budget and National Planning. I was appointed by the President to be the humanitarian coordinator of the crisis in the Northeast. And that was a job that gave me a lot of satisfaction because I saw the result of the work leading in saving lives. In September 2018, last year, Mr. President, the President reassigned me from the Ministry of Budget and National Planning to head the Ministry of Finance. The mandate of the Ministry of Finance is to manage the resources of the country, so we're responsible for public financial management, for public policy, for tax policy, for setting tariffs, and in this process, we also are responsible for supervising the Nigerian Security Exchange. I supervise 12 agencies, including the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FRS, the Nigerian Customs Service, the Security and Exchange Commission, the NDIC. We also had a lot of work that we used to do together with the Central Bank of Nigeria. So the fiscal and the monetary authorities work together to agree both physical and monetary policies. One of the main things that we identified when I assumed in the Ministry of Finance is that the country was suffering from low levels of revenue performance. As at the close of 2018, the average revenue performance was 55%. And therefore, managing and funding the country's budget was a significant strain. So we therefore pulled together a process and formed an initiative that we call the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative. It is meant for us to enhance revenue collection, but also to review and identify new sources of revenue, making sure that our people and our tools are optimally utilized. Our target is to move the revenue of the country from 55% to 85% by the year 2021. Mr. President, we also introduced the road incentive tax credit scheme, which was launched by Mr. President through an executive order. It's a program that invites the private sector to use their resources to build roads that is designed and approved by government. And we have started this scheme and launched it. This program is now in 11 states, building about 800 kilometers of roads with about 7 private companies as investors. When the investors spend their money to build the roads, they recover their funds, including cost of funds and profit through tax credits. We have worked out how the tax credit scheme will work. The 3 major projects are already ongoing, and we already have demands for tax credits that currently the Federal Inland Revenue Service is working on. Mr. President, distinguished members, I also started Project Lighthouse in the Ministry of Finance. Project Lighthouse is a portal that brings together all data sources to enable us to analyze data relating to tax payments, as well as enabling us to take policy decisions that are informed. This project is up and running. It is going to support ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as states. So we're able to, using this data from the immigration, from FRS, from customs, from the banks,
from different sources we pull them, we'll be able to track and identify taxpayer information. This, Mr. President, is helping us to expand the tax base, which is very important in increasing the revenue performance. As at today, the tax to GDP in our country is around 8%. Our target in the ERGP is to move this needle to about 15%. I know it's been a long day, and I want to ask the permission, Mr. President, to stop here at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, President sitting at the chair. Madam Nominee, thank you also very much. Being a mother, for recognizing that it's been a long day. And therefore, it is my singular desire to state that this chamber, this Senate, is very gender sensitive. And being very gender sensitive, we have taken pains to ensure that each of the female nominees who we have seen from their CVs been extremely qualified to be ministers of the Federal Republic. And for you, haven't been double minister, being in the budget before you went to finance. We have every confidence that you will continue along the trajectory that you have started, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Senate Leader.
Mr. President, sitting in the chair, my distinguished colleagues, I rise to move in agreement with the position that has been adopted skillfully by the minority leader. Skillfully by the minority leader. That this candidate, having been screened in 2015 by the same Senate and passed the tests of this Senate, and having secured the confidence of the President, like the majority leader said, for moving her from budget and planning to finance and returning her back again into his cabinet, has demonstrated that Mr. President has immense confidence in her character and ability. With that, Mr. President, I move that the candidate should bow and leave the chamber. I so move, Mr. President.
Excellent.
Is it the wish of the Senate that the nominee takes a bow and go? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Take a bow.
Well, with this last exercise, the Senate has screened a total of 14 nominees on its second day of the screening exercise, with the screening of Zainab Ahmed, the immediate past Minister of Finance. Now she takes her leave. Well, a total of 14 nominees were screened today, while 10 nominees were screened on Wednesday. That is during its first day of screening. bringing a total of 22 nominees that have been screened so far. A total of 24 nominees, I beg your pardon, that have been screened so far. Now, the Senate is now left with 19 nominees that will be coming for their screening. Now the the President of the Senate is now taking his seat now to approve the screening that has taken place today. Well, the screening does not imply that the nominees have been confirmed. The Senate will still, maybe at a later date, set a date for the confirmation of all the screened
Distinguished
nominees.
senators, the Senate, in the Committee of the Whole, resumed consideration of the request of Mr. Presidency in C for the confirmation of nominees for appointments as ministers of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The nominees answered questions from distinguished senators on a number of topical issues. The nominees screened: 1. Otumba Richard Adeni Adebayo, Ekiti State. 2. Ambassador Zubairu Dada, Niger State. 3. Dr. Chris Ingige, Anambra State. 4. Mohammed H. Abdullahi, Nasarawa State. 5. Sunday Akin Dare, Oyo State. 6. Mohammed Musa Bello, Adamawa State. 7. Sadia Umar Farouk, Zamfara State. And 8. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, Kaduna State, as ministers of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Leader of the Senate. I will make an announcement, please. Distinguished colleagues, tomorrow, Friday, as the leader will move for suspension of our standing orders to enable us to sit tomorrow and Monday, tomorrow we'll start with the following nominees. Abubakar Malami from Kebbi State, Senator Hadi Sirika from Katsina State, Dr. Osage Hinare from Edo State, Senator Bemishola Saraki from Kwara State, Pauline Talin from Plateau State, Muhammad Megari Dingeri, Sokoto State, Godi J.D. Agba, Cross River State, and Engineer Suleiman H. Adamu, Jigawa State. We'll start with these nominees. We may finish and have more. So, the Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, before we close the business of the day, distinguished senators, I hereby move that the Senate do suspend Rule 13, subsection 2, to enable us to sit in plenary on Friday, 26 July 2019, and Monday, 29 July 2019, for the confirmation of this national assignment at 10 a.m. on both days. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, before we adjourn, let me thank all of us for staying this long. It has been a long day, but a very fruitful one. Tomorrow is going to be another day by the grace of God. With these remarks, the Senate is hereby adjourned till tomorrow, Friday, the 26th day of July 2019 at 10 a.m. prompt.
Well, this is what we'll call it a day on today's live broadcast of Senate plenary for the ongoing screening of ministerial nominees by the Senate. Well, Senate has now adjourned to reconvene tomorrow, Friday. It has suspended its rule orders and then to enable them sit tomorrow, Friday, for the continuation of the screening of the ministerial nominees. And now we'll hand you over to our studios for the continuation of our programs. I am Ignatius Nko, and on behalf of the outside broadcast crew, enjoy the rest of our programs. Bye for now.